We need your help to fight for privacy.
Television will be there to listen. It doesn't matter whether she has anything to say. She's an extension of his role as head of state. The ceremony is the message. Would-be presidents have to create their own ceremonies, and they're called media events. Howard Baker tried that in New Hampshire. He staged a small media event. Candidate visits Sawmill, shows the common touch. There were only 3 people at the mill. 2 of them weren't even registered to vote, and the third one said he was for George Bush. That didn't matter. There were more than 24 television people there.
I'm John Connolly. How are you?
The idea of campaigning is to draw a crowd. That's what it's always been, and that's what torchlight parades were about. Television just happens to draw the biggest crowd in the world. John Connolly tried to get to that television crowd in New Hampshire by visiting the nuclear plant at Seabrook. Edward Kennedy can always attract cameras. Any Kennedy is a media event. But he was unhappy with the way the cameras were showing him, so he threw parties for his own 48th birthday. He wanted television to transmit pictures of something other than a struggling campaign. And it did, for one day.
The national candidate is well served by getting national attention. And there is a national medium now, and it is called television. And there's no doubt they scheme and try to figure out ways to get on it. I don't see anything dishonorable in that, but I think we have to recognize our obligation not to be taken in simply by a desire or by a trick.
Networks, you see, don't like to be used. They want to control the process. This is Richard Salant, former president of CBS News and now vice chairman of NBC.
You had the phenomenon in '76, and we're going to have it again in '80, of a candidate hitting 6 different cities in one day, standing in front of whatever it is that's colorful and doing some ridiculous thing. And that's the game they play. I've said sooner or later we're going to have enough courage in our daily coverage of a campaign to say, today the candidate was in 6 different cities creating media events and he said nothing. And that'll be the end of our report. We haven't quite got to that yet, but we're going to one of these days.
Until that day, television and politics will try to use each other, chasing each other around the country like mechanical rabbits. Morton Dean of CBS talked about what it's like out there.
What you have is not only a contest among candidates, but a very, very energetic contest among networks for news supremacy. It's the Super Bowl, if you will, of broadcasting.
Dean works for CBS. This is Garrick Utley of NBC. He was ordered not to talk to us. Except for Richard Salant, no NBC people were allowed to cooperate in the making of this program. This is ABC correspondent James Wooten. ABC and CBS did cooperate with the making of this program. Wooten talked about what he does.
Sometimes, with some television stories, I find that I'm able to convey the sense of a moment, the mood of an event, much better than I would have been able to do as a writer. But I never get to tell all of the story. And I must say it's bothersome to me sometimes, the compression that's involved, the condensation.
This is Wooten's boss, the president of ABC News, Roone Arledge.
When you, again, condense a whole day's activity into a minute-and-a-half stand-up piece, all the emotions are condensed. You tend to pick highlights instead of longer, more weighty discussions of things. I think eventually, if we have longer and more news programs, which I really think we will have in one form or another, we'll be able to deal more at length with issues.
Network news presidents would love to have more time each night, but in the end, they're not the people who really run television. It's still an entertainment medium. It's still trying to draw that big crowd for advertisers. Network news seems to be locked into a half hour each night, and that's really only 22 minutes after commercials. Local stations around the country won't let the network news expand into their time because that would cut their profits. The networks won't expand it into prime time because that's where they make their big money. And if candidates don't like that, they can become advertisers. They can buy time just like anybody else who's got something to sell.
From Abilene, out of the heartland of America, out of this small frame house in Abilene, Kansas, came a man, Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Dwight Eisenhower started it. He was the first candidate for president to rely on paid commercials.
Vote for Eisenhower.
Obviously, he wasn't the last.
Jimmy Carter's roots go deep into the dark red soil of southwest Georgia.
America produced a new art form, the paid political commercial.
Re-elect President Carter.
If you believe we've got to do better, think about the Anderson difference.
Television attracted that big crowd, and you could try to sell them anything, including yourself.
With your help, we can do it.
And a sort of artist was created, the media consultant. Robert Squire made commercials for Hubert Humphrey and Jimmy Carter.
I think that a candidate running for public office deserves the best professional advice they can possibly get to communicate through the most important medium that they have to communicate through, which is television.
Robert Goodman did commercials for George Bush.
I think we help dramatize an election, make it more of an event, make it more of an happening.
You can use commercials if you use them subtly in a way to begin to reshape the whole election, almost to change the rules of a particular election.
John Deardorff made commercials for Howard Baker.
A candidate, through the use of paid advertising, can communicate exactly what he or she wants to say in the way that they want to say it at the time that they want it to be said. I mean, it is the certainty of and the fidelity of the communication that makes paid advertising so important.
A lot of the job is really helping the candidate understand himself and understand how he affects other people and what there is about him that is very desirable. And I try to take those desirable elements, because we're not in the education business, we're in the motivation idea.
Motivation was always the idea.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Vice President...
But in the beginning, the words were more straightforward.
I want to talk to you for a moment.
This is Senator John Kennedy.
The candidate looked at the camera and said, "I'll tell you what I think."
This is the way it ought to be done. This is the sound way.
But politicians soon realized that television was a dramatic medium. Television transmits feelings and emotions better than it transmits information. Media consultants tried to motivate Americans to vote the same way that they were motivated to buy toothpaste, with little entertainment.
In a Saturday Evening Post article dated August 31st, 1963, Barry Goldwater said, "Sometimes I think this country would be better off if we could just saw off the eastern seaboard and let it float out to sea." Can a man who makes statements like this be expected to serve all the people justly and fairly?
Candidates presented little dramas with a moral at the end.
One nation under God, indivisible.
Против нас и будете опять готовить нападение, мы так ухнем.
I want American kids to grow up as Americans, and they will, if we have the guts to make our intentions clear. So clear they don't need translation or interpretation, just respect for a country prepared as no country in all history ever was.
In your heart, you know he's right. Vote for Barry Goldwater.
5, 7.
One of the most famous commercials was a little horror story.
8, 9,
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
We must either love each other or we must die.
The Daisy commercial caused an uproar, and it was withdrawn after just one network showing.